Everly Sinclair stood at the edge of her balcony, her silver hair gleaming in the soft glow of the setting sun. At 65, she exuded an air of elegance and wisdom that came from a life fully lived. Her fingers, adorned with a simple gold band, tightened around the stem of her wineglass as she gazed out at the bustling city below. The ring was a reminder of a past she thought she had left behind, but recent events had stirred up memories she'd long suppressed. Just last week, Everly had finalized her divorce from Richard, her husband of 40 years. It wasn't a bitter end, but rather a mutual recognition that they had grown apart, their lives diverging in ways neither had anticipated. Now, standing alone in her penthouse apartment, Everly felt a mix of liberation and trepidation. The world seemed both expansive and daunting, full of possibilities she hadn't considered in decades. As the sky darkened and the city lights began to twinkle, Everly's phone buzzed with a message from her daughter, Sophia. "Mum, don't forget about the gallery opening tomorrow night. It would mean the world to have you there." Everly smiled, grateful for her daughter's unwavering support during this transitional period. Sophia, an accomplished artist in her own right, had always been Everly's rock, even as their roles seemed to reverse in recent years. The next evening, Everly found herself standing amidst a crowd of art enthusiasts, her eyes roaming over the abstract paintings that adorned the walls of the sleek gallery. She felt slightly out of place, her conservative black dress a stark contrast to the eclectic attire of the younger patrons. As she sipped her champagne, a familiar voice called out to her, "Everly, I'm so glad you could make it." Sophia approached, her face beaming with pride and affection. Behind her trailed a young man Everly didn't recognize, his dark eyes intense and curious as they landed on her. "Mum, I'd like you to meet Mateo. He's been helping me set up the exhibition." Sophia gestured to the man, who stepped forward with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Sinclair," Mateo said, his voice rich and melodious. "Sophia has told me so much about you." Everly felt a strange flutter in her chest as she shook Mateo's hand. "Please, call me Everly," she replied, surprised by the warmth in her own voice. "And the pleasure is all mine. Are you an artist as well?" Mateo chuckled, a sound that seemed to reverberate through Everly's body. "No, not at all. I'm actually a literature professor at the university. Art is more of a passion than a profession for me." As they continued to chat, Everly found herself drawn into Mateo's world. At 35, he possessed a maturity and intellect that belied his years. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, from art to literature to philosophy, and Everly felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. She caught herself staring at his strong jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and quickly averted her gaze, chastising herself for such thoughts. The evening wore on, and Everly found herself lingering far longer than she had intended. As the crowd thinned, Sophia approached them once more. "Mum, I hate to cut this short, but I have some potential buyers I need to schmooze. Would you mind if Mateo showed you the rest of the exhibition?" Before Everly could protest, Mateo chimed in. "I'd be honoured to give you a personal tour, Everly. That is, if you're interested." Unable to resist the warmth in his eyes, Everly nodded. "I'd like that very much." As they strolled through the gallery, Mateo's knowledge of art impressed Everly. He spoke passionately about each piece, offering insights that made her see the works in a new light. At one point, he leaned in close to point out a detail in a painting, and Everly caught a whiff of his cologne, a heady mix of sandalwood and citrus that made her pulse quicken. "You know," Mateo said softly, his eyes meeting hers, "I've always believed that true beauty transcends age. It's about the soul, the experiences that shape us." His gaze lingered on her face, and Everly felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "That's a lovely sentiment," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Though I'm not sure everyone would agree." Mateo's hand brushed against hers, sending a jolt of electricity through her body. "Then they're not looking closely enough," he murmured. The moment was interrupted by Sophia's return, and Everly stepped back. suddenly aware of how close she and Mateo had been standing. As they said their goodbyes, Mateo pressed a business card into her hand. "In case you ever want to continue our discussion on Proust," he said with a wink. That night, as Everly lay in bed, her mind raced with conflicting emotions. The attraction she felt towards Mateo was undeniable, but the rational part of her brain screamed that it was inappropriate, even scandalous. She was old enough to be his mother, for heaven's sake. And yet, the way he had looked at her, spoken to her, it had awakened something she thought long dormant. Days passed, and Everly found herself unable to shake thoughts of Mateo. She threw herself into her work as a retired judge, taking on pro bono cases and mentoring young lawyers, but his face would appear unbidden in quiet moments. His business card sat on her nightstand, a constant temptation. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Everly's resolve finally crumbled. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card, her heart pounding as it rang. "Hello?" Mateo's voice was just as she remembered, warm and inviting. "Mateo? It's Everly Sinclair from the gallery opening." There was a pause, and for a moment Everly feared she had made a terrible mistake. Then Mateo spoke, his voice filled with genuine pleasure. "Everly, I'm so glad you called. I was hoping I'd hear from you." They talked for over an hour, their conversation flowing as easily as it had at the gallery. By the end of the call, they had made plans to meet for coffee the following weekend. As Everly hung up the phone, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursed through her veins. What was she doing? This wasn't like her at all, and yet the prospect of seeing Mateo again filled her with a joy she hadn't felt in years. The days leading up to their coffee date were a blur of anticipation and self-doubt for Everly. She found herself standing in front of her closet, scrutinizing her wardrobe with a critical eye she hadn't used in decades. Everything seemed too old, too matronly. In a moment of madness, she called Sophia and asked to borrow some clothes. "Mom, is everything okay?" Sophia's voice was laced with concern. "You never borrow my clothes." Everly fumbled for an explanation. "Oh, I have a meeting with some younger colleagues, and I don't want to seem out of touch." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Okay," Sophia said slowly. "Why don't you come over and we can go through my closet together?" An hour later, Everly stood in front of Sophia's full-length mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The slim-fit jeans and flowing blouse were a far cry from her usual conservative attire. Sophia stood behind her, a mixture of pride and confusion on her face. "You look amazing, Mom," she said, meeting Everly's eyes in the mirror. "But are you sure everything's all right? You seem different lately." Everly turned to face her daughter, guilt gnawing at her insides. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just adjusting to this new chapter in my life, I suppose." Sophia pulled her into a tight hug. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Everly nodded, fighting back tears. If only she could explain the turmoil in her heart, the unexpected feelings that were threatening to upend her carefully ordered world. Saturday arrived, and Everly found herself sitting in a trendy cafe, her hands wrapped around a steaming latte. She had arrived early, her nerves getting the better of her. As the minutes ticked by, she began to wonder if Mateo would show up at all. Perhaps he had come to his senses, realized the absurdity of meeting a woman nearly twice his age. Just as she was about to give up and leave, the cafe door opened and Mateo walked in. Everly's breath caught in her throat. He looked even more handsome than she remembered, dressed casually in dark jeans and a crisp white shirt. His eyes scanned the room, lighting up when they landed on her. "Everly," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "You look beautiful." She felt herself blushing like a schoolgirl. "Thank you, Mateo. I wasn't sure you'd come." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world." As they talked, Everly felt the years melting away. Mateo listened intently as she spoke about her career as a judge, her eyes widening as she recounted some of her more challenging cases. In turn, she found herself captivated by his passion for literature, the way his eyes lit up as he discussed his favourite authors. "You know," Mateo said, leaning in closer, "I've always been drawn to older women. There's a depth, a richness of experience that's intoxicating." Everly felt her heart race at his words. "Mateo," she said softly, "I'm flattered, truly, but you have to understand. This, whatever this is, it can't go anywhere. I'm old enough to be your mother." Mateo's hand tightened around hers. "Age is just a number, Everly. What matters is how we feel, the connection between us. Can you honestly say you don't feel it too?" She wanted to deny it, to pull her hand away and walk out of the cafe. But the truth was, she did feel it. The attraction, the spark of something that could be so much more. It terrified her. "I do feel it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Mateo, think about the complications. What would people say? My daughter, my friends." He leaned in even closer, his breath warm on her cheek. "Let them talk. We're both adults, Everly. We deserve happiness, wherever we find it." Before she could respond, Mateo's lips were on hers. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, but quickly deepened into something more passionate. Everly felt herself responding, years of pent-up desire pouring out in that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Everly knew her life would never be the same. The rational part of her brain screamed that this was madness, that she should walk away now before things went too far. But her heart, long dormant, was singing a different tune. "Come back to my place," Mateo whispered, his eyes dark with desire. "We have so much more to talk about." Everly hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As they left the cafe together, she felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. She was stepping into uncharted territory, leaving behind the safety of her ordered life for something wild and unpredictable. Mateo's apartment was a reflection of his personality, warm, intellectual, with walls lined with bookshelves and art prints. As soon as the door closed behind them, he pulled Everly into another kiss, more urgent this time. She responded with equal fervour, her hands exploring the contours of his muscular back. They stumbled towards the bedroom, shedding clothes along the way. In the back of her mind, Everly marvelled at her own boldness. It had been years since she'd been intimate with anyone, let alone someone as young and vibrant as Mateo. As they fell onto the bed together, Everly felt a moment of self-consciousness. Her body bore the marks of age, softness where there was once firmness, lines etched by time and experience. But the way Mateo looked at her, touched her, made her feel like the most desirable woman in the world. Their lovemaking was passionate, intense, a meeting of bodies and souls that left them both breathless and trembling. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Everly felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Mateo propped himself up on one elbow, gazing down at her with a mixture of tenderness and awe. "You're incredible, Everly," he murmured, tracing the line of her jaw with his finger. "I've never met anyone like you." She smiled up at him, her heart full. "This is madness, you know," she said softly. "What are we doing?" He leaned down to kiss her gently. "We're living, Everly. Truly living, perhaps for the first time in a long time." As the weeks passed, Everly found herself caught up in a whirlwind romance unlike anything she had ever experienced. Mateo awakened parts of her she thought long dormant, challenging her intellectually and physically in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. They stole moments together whenever they could, long lunches in hidden cafes, passionate encounters in Mateo's apartment, quiet evenings discussing literature and philosophy. Everly felt like a woman reborn, her skin glowing with newfound vitality, her eyes sparkling with secret joy. But with the highs came the inevitable lows. The secrecy of their relationship began to weigh heavily on Everly. She hated lying to Sophia, making up excuses for her sudden unavailability and changed demeanour. The guilt gnawed at her, especially when she saw the concern in her daughter's eyes. One evening, as they lay in bed together, Mateo broached the subject that had been hanging between them. "Everly," he said softly, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I think it's time we told people about us. I'm tired of hiding, of pretending you're not the most important person in my life." Everly felt her heart constrict. "Mateo, you know we can't. The scandal, the judgment. It would destroy everything." He sat up, frustration evident in his voice. "So we're supposed to live like this forever? Sneaking around, pretending we don't care for each other? I love you, Everly. I want to shout it from the rooftops." The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had used the word love, and its weight was palpable. Everly felt tears prick at her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, "but love isn't always enough. There's so much at stake. My reputation, my relationship with Sophia." Mateo's face hardened. "So your reputation is more important than what we have, than my feelings?" The argument that followed was their first real fight, and it left them both shaken. Everly left Mateo's apartment that night with a heavy heart, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake in allowing herself to fall so deeply. The next few days were agony for Everly. She threw herself into her work, taking on extra cases and staying late at the office, anything to avoid the emptiness of her apartment and the constant temptation to call Mateo. But his absence left a void that nothing else could fill. It was Sophia who finally forced the issue. Showing up unannounced at Everly's apartment one evening, she confronted her mother with worry and frustration. "Mum, what's going on with you?" she demanded. "You've been distant, distracted. I'm worried about you." Everly felt the walls she had carefully constructed begin to crumble. Looking into her daughter's concerned face, she knew she couldn't keep up the charade any longer. "Sophia, sweetheart, sit down," she said softly. "There's something I need to tell you." As Everly poured out the whole story, her relationship with Mateo, the depth of her feelings, her fears and doubts, she watched a myriad of emotions play across Sophia's face. Shock, disbelief, hurt, and finally a grudging understanding. "Oh, Mom," Sophia sighed when Everly had finished. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I could see you were happier, more alive somehow. I just never imagined..." Everly reached for her daughter's hand. "I was afraid, darling, afraid of hurting you, of disappointing you. I know how this must look." Sophia squeezed her mother's hand, her expression softening. "Mum, all I've ever wanted is for you to be happy. Yes, this is unexpected, and I'll admit it's going to take some time for me to wrap my head around it, but I love you, and I want to support you." Tears welled up in Everly's eyes as she pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "Thank you, sweetheart. Your understanding means everything to me." As they pulled apart, Sophia gave a wry smile. "So, when do I get to meet him? Properly, I mean. Not as my assistant, but as the man who's stolen my mother's heart." The relief Everly felt at her daughter's acceptance was overwhelming. It was as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. That night, for the first time in days, she slept peacefully. The next morning, Everly woke with a sense of purpose. She reached for her phone, her heart racing as she dialed Mateo's number. When he answered, his voice was guarded, still raw from their argument. "Mateo," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm sorry I've been a coward and I've hurt you. But I'm ready now, ready to face the world, to be with you openly, if you'll still have me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Everly feared she had lost him. Then she heard a choked sob. "Everly," Mateo breathed. "I thought I'd lost you. Of course I'll have you. I love you, all of you, no matter what anyone else thinks." They agreed to meet at their favourite cafe, the place where their relationship had truly begun. As Everly walked through the door, she saw Mateo sitting at their usual table, his face lighting up as their eyes met. She moved towards him with purpose, no longer caring who might see them together. Before Mateo could stand, Everly leaned down and kissed him deeply, right there in the middle of the crowded cafe. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, She saw a mixture of surprise and joy in his eyes. "Well," he said with a grin, "I guess we're really doing this, aren't we?" Everly laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "We really are," she replied, taking his hand in hers. Over the next few months, Everly and Mateo navigated the choppy waters of making their relationship public. There were raised eyebrows and whispered comments, of course. Some of Everly's older friends were scandalized, and she found herself drifting away from certain social circles. But there were surprises too. Many of her colleagues, particularly the younger ones, were supportive and even admiring. They saw in Everly and Mateo's relationship a testament to the power of love to transcend societal norms. Sophia, true to her word, made an effort to get to know Mateo as more than just her former assistant. While there was initial awkwardness, she came to appreciate the depth of his feelings for her mother and the positive change he had brought to Everly's life. As winter turned to spring, Everly found herself facing a new challenge. Mateo had been offered a prestigious position at a university in Paris, a dream opportunity for his career. He asked Everly to come with him, to start a new life together in the City of Light. The decision weighed heavily on Everly. On one hand, the thought of leaving behind her life in the States, her daughter, her friends, was daunting. She had built a life here, had roots that ran deep. On the other hand, the prospect of a fresh start with Mateo, free from the whispers and judgments that still followed them, was undeniably appealing. After weeks of soul-searching and long conversations with both Mateo and Sophia, Everly made her decision. On a warm evening in May, she met Mateo at their favourite spot in the park, the place where they had shared so many intimate conversations. "Mateo," she said, taking his hands in hers, "I've done a lot of thinking about your offer, about Paris." He looked at her expectantly, his dark eyes filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Everly took a deep breath. "I love you, and I want to be with you. But my life is here. My family, my work, my history, it's all here. I can't leave it behind, not even for you." Mateo's face fell, and Everly felt her heart constrict. But before he could speak, she continued. "However," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "I have a counter-proposal. What if, instead of me moving to Paris, you considered staying here? The university here has been trying to woo you for their literature department. You could accept their offer, and we could build a life together right here." Mateo's eyes widened in surprise. "But Everly, Paris has always been my dream. The Sorbonne, the literary history." Everly nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know, my love, and if that's truly what you want, I'll support you. But I want you to consider this. Dreams can change. Sometimes what we thought we wanted isn't what truly makes us happy." She gestured around them, at the city skyline visible through the trees. "This could be our Paris, Mateo. Our story, our adventure. We've already broken so many rules, defied so many expectations. Why stop now?" Mateo was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. He pulled Everly close, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're right," he said softly. "My dream isn't a place. It's you, Everly. You're my adventure, my story. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be." Tears of joy sprang to Everly's eyes as Mateo sealed his words with a kiss. As they embraced, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Everly felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had faced her fears, challenged societal norms, and come out stronger on the other side. In the years that followed, Everly and Mateo built a life together that defied expectations and inspired those around them. They faced challenges, of course, the occasional disapproving glance, the need to constantly prove the validity of their love. But they faced it all together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Everly continued her work in the legal field, using her experience and newfound passion to advocate for unconventional relationships and challenge age-based discrimination. Mateo thrived in his role at the university, his lectures on love in literature drawing from his own extraordinary experience. Sophia, witnessing the depth of her mother's happiness, became one of their staunchest supporters. She even joked about writing a book about their love story one day, much to Everly's amused chagrin. As Everly approached her 70th birthday, she looked back on the tumultuous journey that had led her to this point. The divorce that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. Her relationship with Mateo had taught her that it was never too late for love, for passion, for new beginnings. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, Mateo turned to Everly with a mischievous glint in his eye. "You know," he said, "I think it's time we shocked everyone again." Everly raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at her lips. "Oh, and how do you propose we do that?" Mateo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it to reveal a stunning emerald ring, he got down on one knee. "Everly Sinclair," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me? Let's show the world that love truly knows no boundaries. Not age, not convention, not anything." Tears sprang to Everly's eyes as she looked at the man before her. No longer the young professor who had swept her off her feet, but a partner who had stood by her through thick and thin. In that moment, she saw not just their past, but their future, filled with love, adventure, and the joy of defying expectations. With a radiant smile, Everly gave her answer, sealing it with a kiss that held all the passion of their first encounter and all the depth of their years together. As they embraced, the sky ablaze with the colours of sunset, Everly knew that their greatest adventure was still to come. Their love story, unconventional as it was, had become a testament to the power of following one's heart, of daring to love freely and fiercely, regardless of age or societal norms. And as they looked to the future hand in hand, Everly and Mateo were ready to write the next chapter of their extraordinary tale, together.